"This house is mine now, mother-in-law," my vicious son-in-law Richard announced after the funeral. The air was still thick with the cloying scent of lilies and damp, freshly turned earth. My daughter, my Sophia, was barely cold in the ground, and this vulture was already picking at the bones of our family. He stood in the entryway of my ancestral home, the Kovach homestead, built by the same hands that first harnessed the river that gave this town life. He was disgustingly handsome in his tailored black suit, a shallow performance of grief he had worn for the benefit of the town. Now, with the last of the mourners gone, the mask was off. "I beg your pardon?" My voice came out like gravel, as dry as the riverbed in a drought. "The will!" He produced a crisp document from his breast pocket. He didn't just hold it, he brandished it. Sophia, bless her heart, left everything to me, the house, the surrounding acreage, all of it. She knew I'd know what to do with it, unlike some. His eyes, the color of cold steel, flicked over me. I was 76 years old, draped in the black wool I'd worn to bury my only child. I must have looked like a relic to him, a piece of old furniture to be discarded. "You have 3 days, Helena," he said, his voice laced with a triumphant, oily charm, "to gather your personals and vacate." He smiled then, a tight reptilian twitch of the lips. It was the smile of a man who believed he had just won. He saw the house. He saw the land. He saw the dollar signs. He seemed to forget that I'm the one who holds the keys to the town dam. My grief for Sophia was a physical thing. It was not the soft, weeping sorrow of a sudden loss. It was a hard, cold, jagged stone lodged in my chest. It had been growing for years, ever in parallel with Richard's insidious presence in our lives. Sophia was soft. Where I was granite, she was sandstone. She craved the sunshine. I, in my practicality, often forgot to provide. I had spent my life managing the river, the sluices, the pressure gauges, the town's water table. My hands were calloused from the brass wheels and the iron levers. I knew how to read a rising water line and the language of a downstream current. I was a woman of earth and water. Sophia was a creature of air and dreams. She loved her books, her watercolors, and the idea of a life far from the rumble of the reservoir. Richard Black had blown into our quiet town 5 years ago like a summer storm, all flash and noise. He was a speculator from the city, he said. He smelled of cheap cologne and expensive lies. I saw immediately the hollowness behind his eyes, the avarice that clung to him like a second skin. But Sophia, my poor, kind, trusting Sophia, saw a rescuer. She saw a worldly man who promised her art galleries and European travel, a life beyond her mother's long shadow. "You're just being hard on him, Mama," she would plead, her voice thin. "You're hard on everyone. He loves me." I held my tongue, a mistake I will take to my grave. I mistook my daughter's desperation for love as strength. I let her marry him. The change was immediate and devastating. He isolated her. First, it was trips she was too tired to take to my house. Then, the phone calls became shorter, her voice strained, as if he were listening from the other room. He always was. Then came the illness. It was a creeping fatigue, a fogginess of the mind. Richard dismissed our local Dr. Matthews, a man who had delivered Sophia, and brought in specialists from the city. They prescribed new, powerful medications. When I visited, my daughter was often asleep, her eyes cloudy, her vibrant spirit dimmed to a flicker. "The doctors say she just needs rest, Helena," Richard would say, steering me back toward the door, his hand on my arm, a gesture not of comfort, but of removal, I knew. in the way a mother knows the cry of her child, in the way I know the groan of the dam under pressure. I knew. He was killing her. I started my own preparations. I am not a fool, and I am not without resources. I am Elena Kovac. My family built this town. I swapped one of her new vials of medication during a visit. Replacing it with a simple saline solution I'd prepared, I sent the original vial, sealed and marked, to a private lab in the city using a name that could not be traced back to me. I hoped to get the results, to have the proof, to march into that house with the sheriff and drag that monster away from her. But the poison was faster than the mail. The official report, signed by a coroner I didn't recognize, another of Richard's imported experts, called it a tragic accidental overdose. Sophia, in her confused state, had taken too much of her medication. I was too late. The stone in my chest solidified, and the cold fury of the river in winter set in. Now, standing in my own hallway, holding a forged will, I finally understood the why. It wasn't for her small trust fund. It was for the land. The ancestral lands of the Kovac family, which included the house and the wide, flat acreage behind it, stretching all the way to the old quarry. 3 days, he had said. He did not know what an old woman could do in 3. My first call was not to a lawyer. It was to Mike Sarge Jensen. Mike had served with my late husband Daniel in the military. When Daniel died, Mike had drifted, and I gave him a purpose. He was the caretaker of the dams. Not just the new concrete and steel automated facility that provided the town's power, but the old one. The old lady, my grandfather had called it. It sat 2 miles upstream, nestled in a high canyon. Most of the townsfolk thought it was a relic, a picturesque ruin. They were wrong. My family had never let it fall into disrepair. It was our secret, our insurance policy. It was built not just to hold the river back, but to direct it. It had a series of bypass channels and auxiliary sluices that the new dam lacked, built by men who understood the river's moods. Mike, with his rigid posture and unwavering loyalty, had been polishing its brass fittings and greasing its gears for 20 years. He answered on the first ring, "Ma'am?" "He's making his move, Mike. He's thrown me out." There was a heavy silence. I heard the faint squeak of a rag on metal. "The house, ma'am?" "The house? The land? All of it? He has a piece of paper that says it's his." "A piece of paper ain't a deed, and a deed ain't the truth," Mike grunted. "What's the play?" "He has guests coming. Friday, 3 days from now. I need to know what they're doing. I need to know why the land." "I've seen 'em already, ma'am," Mike said, his voice dropping. "Men in suits. Been sniffing around the quarry and the flatlands for a week. Richard's been giving them the grand tour. I overheard one of them talking about mineral deposits, talking about boring samples." Of course. My mind flashed to old family stories. My great-grandfather had believed the land was rich in something. He never had the means to find out. Richard, with his city connections, must have pulled the old county surveys. He wasn't just stealing my house. He was planning to gut my heritage, to tear open the earth my family had protected, to poison the water table, all for money. The illness, the murder. It was all a prelude to a corporate rape. "He's signing the land away, Mike, on Friday, in my house." "That's a bold play," Mike mused. "It's an arrogant one," I corrected. "He thinks I'm a grieving old woman. He thinks I'm powerless." Are you sure about this, Helena? The old lady is not a toy. If we open the old quarry bypass..." "I know exactly what I'm doing, Mike," I said. and the coldness in my own voice startled me. I'm not flooding the town, I'm not hurting a soul. I'm performing localized irrigation on my own property, the property that bastard thinks he's about to sell. He's signing the papers Friday night. He's having a small party at the house to celebrate. Threw it in my face this morning. Even invited me to come serve drinks before I'm homeless. Arrogance, Mike spat. It'll be his undoing. No, Mike, I said, walking to the window and looking at the distant, placid line of the reservoir. His undoing will be water and me. The next 2 days were a blur of calculated action, masked by the performance of defeat. To Richard, I was the image of a broken woman. I packed boxes. I wept very publicly in the town's small grocery store. I let the neighbors pat my hand and tell me how awful it was, how brave Sophia had been. I let Richard see me shuffling, frail, and beaten. A predator, my father once told me, always mistakes stillness for surrender. While I packed, I was not packing to leave, I was gathering my real weapons. I found what I was looking for in Sophia's art studio, a room Richard never entered. Tucked behind a loose floorboard where she used to hide her childhood diary, I found a new one. I sat on the dusty floor, my old bones screaming, and read my daughter's last months. October 14th. Richard was angry today. A man on the phone yelled at him about permits. He was drinking. He told me I was a worthless invalid and that if I didn't sign the new papers for the loan, he'd put me in a home. November 2nd. He talks about the land, never about me. He walks the fields behind the house, taking pictures. He told me the land is sick and needs to be cured. November 10th. The new medicine makes me so tired. I can't paint. I tried to tell him, and he smiled. He said, "That's good, darling. It means it's working." November 19th. I'm scared. I don't think I'm sick, Mama. I think I'm being poisoned. He keeps the medicine locked, but I saw him. It's not the bottle from Dr. Matthews, it's a different one. I love you, Mama. Don't let him win. I closed the book, my hands shaking. The cold stone in my chest now had a white-hot core. This diary was my emotional proof, but it was not my legal one. That arrived on Thursday, day 2. A discreet package delivered not to the house, but to Mike at the dam. It contained 2 items: the toxicology report from the lab. The substance in the vial I'd sent was not a heart medication. It was a potent, slow-acting, and highly controlled chemical poison, designed to mimic the symptoms of cardiac failure. A report from a private investigator I had hired weeks ago, the moment Richard brought in the specialists. It contained his real history, a string of bankruptcies, 2 other wealthy wives who had died unexpectedly, a mountain of debt. I had the why, I had the how. The last piece was the will. I took the forgery Richard had given me, along with a stack of Sophia's old letters, to a retired judge in the next county, a man who had been Daniel's closest friend. He owed me a favor. He took one look at the signature on the will. "That's a good forgery, Helena," he said, adjusting his glasses. "But it's not her." He looped the S from the top. Sophia always looped from the bottom. She's done it since she was 6 years old. He made a call. He got me a handwriting expert who agreed to work all night. The expert's affidavit would be ready by Friday afternoon. I had him on forgery. I had him on murder. But that was for the law. That was for the police. That wasn't my justice. That wouldn't save the land. That wouldn't undo the deal he was about to sign. My justice was waiting upstream. Friday night, day 3. A storm broke over the mountains, the kind of violent, sudden deluge that can raise the river level by feet in a matter of hours. It was as if the sky itself was on my side. Richard's party was in full swing. I saw the lights of my house blazing, heard the faint pop of a champagne cork carried on the wind. The mining executives were there, their luxury cars parked arrogantly in my driveway. They were in the great study, my father's study, signing the papers that would destroy his legacy. I was not in a motel. I was at the Old Lady, standing on the observation gantry with Mike, soaked to the skin, the wind whipping my gray hair across my face. The roar of the rising water below us was deafening. "The reservoir is at peak," Mike yelled over the wind. "The pressure is perfect. It's now or never, Helena." I looked down at the dark, churning water. It was alive. It was angry. I could feel its power through the soles of my boots. "He thinks he's harnessing the land," I said, my voice surprisingly calm. "He doesn't understand. The land can't be harnessed. And the river always remembers where it's supposed to go." My phone, clutched in my hand, buzzed a simple text from the judge's son, who I'd paid to pose as a waiter for the party. "Ink is wet." "Now, Mike," I said. "It took both of us. These were not buttons. These were great. Iron wheels, 3 feet in diameter. They hadn't been turned in 50 years. But Mike had kept them greased. We put our backs into it. The metal screamed in protest, a long, tearing groan that sounded like a dinosaur waking up. Then, with a final shuddering clunk, the gear caught. The bypass sluice for the old quarry channel was open. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, we felt a new vibration, a deep seismic thrum. A section of the main reservoir, a torrent the size of a freight train, diverted from its main course and slammed into the dry, forgotten channel. It did not go toward the town. The town was safe, high on the opposite ridge. It went, with the infallible memory of gravity, down the old winding path that led directly, precisely, to the flatlands behind the Kovac homestead. Richard was laughing. He raised his glass. "To the future, gentlemen. To the black Kovac mineral." His toast was cut short by a sound. A low, deep rumble, like an earthquake. A glass of champagne vibrated off the edge of the mahogany desk and shattered on the floor. "What the hell was that?" one of the executives asked, his smile faltering. "Just the storm," Richard said, annoyed. "This old house groans a bit." Then the lights flickered and died, plunging the room into darkness, lit only by the flashes of lightning. And the rumbling grew louder. It was joined by another sound, a sound of splintering wood, a sound of rushing. The waiter I'd hired, a young man with quick wits, tripped and knocked over the backup lantern, extinguishing the only other light. In the chaos, he unlocked the heavy terrace doors as I'd instructed and slipped out into the storm. A tremor shook the entire house. It wasn't an earthquake. It was the foundation settling. "What is that smell?" another executive asked, sniffing the air. "It smells like mud, like the river." Richard fumbled for his phone, turning on its flashlight. He pointed it at the study door. A dark, muddy ribbon of water was pushing its way under the door. "The basement!" Richard yelled. "The storm must be flooding the basement!" He pulled the heavy door open. It wasn't a trickle. It was a wave. Muddy, churning water from the newly awakened riverbed poured into the hallway, knee-deep in an instant. It was not a violent, killing flood, it was a filling. It was the inevitable, heavy, patient reclamation of the land. The men shouted. They scrambled onto chairs, onto the desk. "The papers!" The lead executive screamed, lunging for the desk. "But the contracts? the product of Richard's entire scheme, were already floating. The expensive ink, the ink that was barely wet, was running, dissolving into the brown, swirling water that was now 3 feet deep in my father's study outside. The real work was being done. The main torrent had bypassed the house and hit the flatlands, the dry, valuable acreage, the mineral deposits. The water didn't just flood it. It stayed. It filled the old quarry. It saturated the dry earth. It followed the channels my great-grandfather had dug for irrigation, channels that had long since dried up. It was, in a matter of minutes, exactly what it had been a century ago, a swamp. The water, having found its old bed, was home. By dawn, the storm had passed. The police cars, not one but 3 plus the county sheriff, rolled up the drive. They couldn't get close. The house was an island in a newly formed, very large, and very permanent lake. Richard and his mining partners were huddled on the roof of the grand Victorian porch, soaked, shivering, and covered in filth. I walked up the drive, dry under a heavy black umbrella. Mike was with me. Richard saw me. His face, in the gray morning light, was a mask of disbelief and pure, unadulterated hatred. "You!" he shrieked, pointing a shaking finger. "You did this, you old witch! You flooded me! You ruined me!" My, Richard," I said, my voice carrying easily over the calm water. "Looks like you have a plumbing problem." "Arrest her!" he screamed at the sheriff. "She destroyed my property." Sheriff Brody, a man I'd known since he was in diapers, tipped his hat to me. "Ma'am." He then turned his gaze back to Richard. "Well, son, your property is a matter of some debate, but even if it were yours, I can't arrest a woman for an act of God. And this here," he gestured to the new wetland, "looks like the old Kovac swamp just reclaimed itself. Happens all the time. It wasn't an act of God, it was her." "More pressing matters, Richard," the sheriff said, pulling out a pair of handcuffs. "Richard Black, you're under arrest." Richard froze. "For what? For trespassing? This is my house." "No," Sheriff Brody said, his voice hard. "For the murder of Sophia Black Kovac, for the forgery of a legal will, and about a dozen other things I'm looking forward to reading to you." Richard's face went white. He looked from the sheriff to the handcuffs, and then to me. He finally understood. He thought the flood was my only weapon. He thought I was all brute force. Like him. He forgot that the hand that controls the water also knows how to be patient, how to gather evidence, how to sign a check for a lab, how to make a phone call to a judge. The flood was just the punctuation, the full stop at the end of his story. The mining executives, seeing the handcuffs and the word murder, began shouting at once, distancing themselves, claiming they'd been conned. They would be the ones to tear him apart in civil court. The land was now worthless for mining. It would take decades and millions in environmental mitigation before a single shovel could break ground. His deal was quite literally dead in the water. As they led him away in cuffs, his designer suit ruined, his future in ashes, his eyes met mine. I didn't smile. I didn't say a word. I just watched. He took my daughter's future. I took his. A trade, a balance. The river demands a balance. It's been 6 months. The trial was short. The evidence was overwhelming: the diary, the toxicology report, the testimony from his other wives' families. Richard Black will die in prison. The house is still drying out. The smell of river mud is stubborn, but I'm in no hurry. I've hired a local crew to repair the foundation. I'm sitting on the porch, my porch, drinking tea, the Black Kovac swamp, as the town has wryly nicknamed it, is full of life. Frogs sing where miners were supposed to dig. Herons stalk the shallows where his trucks were supposed to roll. It's a protected wetland now. I've donated the land to a trust in Sophia's name, a nature preserve. Mike's with me. He's polishing the brass handle on the front door. "Water's settling in nicely, ma'am," he says. "It always does, Mike," I reply, sipping my tea. "It always finds its level." Richard thought power was a signature on a piece of paper. He thought it was money and lies and the ability to bully those weaker than himself. He was wrong. Power is patience. Power is knowing the land you stand on, knowing its history, its bones. It's understanding that some things, a mother's love, a river's memory, can't be bought or forged. They can't be controlled. They can only, when the time is right, be unleashed. I couldn't save my daughter from the monster she let in, but I saved her home. I saved her memory. I saved the land. The water came, and it washed the stain of him away. The house is quiet. The air is clean. It's mine.